the threat of frost and freezing temperatures has finally passed. And because of that, now is the time that I need to get my garden going. However, I had originally planned on putting my garden in the back of the property. There's a big mound of dirt back there. I'm gonna have that knocked down. I'm gonna have the original garden leveled and regraded. And then once that's all done, I'll be putting in a formal kitchen garden back behind the cabin. But in the meantime, since that work hasn't begun yet, and I don't want to wait too long to start my vegetable garden because the growing season here is so short, averaging at about 90 to 110 days, I need to get that garden planted now. Last year I had a new roof put on my cabin, and originally there was a plan to extend this roof right here out and over this area, creating a little awning. The purpose of that awning is twofold. One, to act as a portico, so I have a place to escape the rain and weather as I'm entering into the cabin. Also because it's the entrance to the Arctic entry. And so it'll allow me a place to come in and out during the winter months without tracking snow and cold into the cabin. Also, it gives Kenai a place to come out and be without having to be on a lead. I know there's a lot of people that question, why is he on a lead? Well, the main reason for that is because if he sees a wild animal, he will take off after it, and there's no getting him back at that point because he will go and go and go until he gets what he's after. And so I keep him on a lead so that I can keep him controlled and keep him safe as well. Currently he's sitting over here behind me and he's watching something off in the woods. Why am I doing my garden up front like this? And especially on the north side of the cabin, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Well, as you can see where I'm standing right now, it's getting sunlight. It's the middle of the day here, and there will be sunlight until, well, basically 21 hours out of the day, there will be some form of daylight. And so this part of the cabin will actually get an extensive amount of daylight upon it, allowing my fruits and vegetables and whatever I plan to grow in here to get enough sunlight to produce a harvest. But I also need to protect my crop because there are moose that come through and like to eat. There are also rabbits in this area. My plan is to take this dog run right here and build this out so that it extends along the corner of the cabin here right in front of the Arctic entry. So some of you have questioned, why do I carry a knife on my belt? It's for tasks like this more than it is anything. Yeah, that's really the main purpose for this. So my plan with this dog run is to have it extend right here between the opening of the cabin and this first post that is basically holding up the awning over the front of the cabin, and then extend out along this line here, and then come back towards the edge of the Arctic entry on the north side. My thought is to find the gate, which is back 4 panels here, and have the entrance to the Arctic entry awning or yard to be right here. And that will allow me to have garden beds that run along the length here and straight back towards the Arctic entry itself. Since this piece right here is the most pivotal, since it has a true destination that it must reside in, this is where I'm going to start. I'm just going to lean this up for just a moment here. Now this isn't to protect Kenai from bears or anything like that. It's more to just provide a simple run that he can go out into without me having to worry about him running off more than anything. I realize that chain link is not the most attractive thing to look at. It has very little curb appeal, if any. However, I do have a plan to hide the chain link or make it less obvious, if you will. So I'll show you that coming up. Well, the gimbal went to sleep on me, so hopefully the camera doesn't fly off the tripod the way I have it set up. But you see Kenai over there? He's so bored watching me put this together. He's thinking, oh, gosh, never going to get to run free. Poor dog. So I need to run in and get a new tripod. But in the meantime, I just kind of want to get this done because I'm sure you can hear the wind blowing. And just on the other side of the cabin are rain clouds. It rained really hard yesterday, and so I'm a day behind schedule here on getting things done outside. And so I really just want to get this dog run up and get the beds put in because I need to protect my cabbages. Something, I'm sure it looks like a caterpillar, got into them and ate the tops off of about half of the cabbages. I doubt that they're going to recover, to be quite honest with you. I assume it was a caterpillar because it was up on top of the wood pile. So it wasn't a bunny rabbit. I don't think it was a moose because I don't have any moose tracks or any footage of moose coming up to the cabin. So my assumption is that it was either a mouse or a shrew or a caterpillar. But either way, I need to get them out here and get them under some netting to keep things from getting to them. So back to work I go. Pinch the fingers. I realize this is more of an illusion of protection than it is actual protection. Luckily, Kenai's pretty well behaved, so I don't have to worry about him jumping over this or climbing or digging underneath it. But it's more to give me peace of mind to think the moose aren't going to eat my veggies or the rabbits, even though the rabbits can clearly dig underneath this. Right now, Kenai's on the outside and I'm on the inside. It's kind of backwards there. This is ridiculous, let me just say. Some things, I have to admit, would probably be easier if there was a second set of hands here. But it's not impossible to do things by yourself. Even big, daunting tasks that might be easier with that second individual are not impossible to do alone. In order to keep the fence line in a straight line, I've resorted to pounding in spikes on every inside fence pole. I'm just going to go ahead and get this hammered in and then set this fence post over the spike, which is going to help to hold it into place. Aha, success. Well, you can see now that the first run of panels is relatively straight and perpendicular to the cabin. Now it's a matter of getting the next set anchored in. Pretty good. It looks like it's square, so I'm just going to set that there so I can keep it in check as I continue down this line of fence panels and get this all tied in. So as you can see, everything looks square, everything looks nice. Last thing to do is to secure this corner and this panel here, because there's an opening here that Kenai can get through. Everything is nice and contained. Yep, this is good. I feel like one of the guys doing the log toss. Oh, they went the camera, but I know you can still see me. I feel like one of the guys doing the log toss at the Highlands games, but this and one more of these, I think, is what I'm going to use to close up that gap between the end of the run and the cabin. For now, anyhow. Temporary, but at least it's something better than hardware cloth, I think. Which chicken wire and hardware cloth are about my only options at this moment. Or is it? Might have something else over in the junk pile that was pulled out of the kitchen. But for now, since I already got this here, I'm gonna get this in place. The last part of this doesn't quite reach, and so there's this gap here. So I've just gone ahead and brought over this beam, and still not enough. Now I have another beam that I could bring over as well to tie this off, but temporarily, because this, I don't think this beam is a good idea to leave here. Temporarily, I just want to block access. I aren't really concerned too much about anything else other than to close off Kenai's ability to run through the fence. So I'm going to put that there and put this here, and for now I'm just going to spike this post in so it can't pull out, and that's going to have to do in the meantime. I'll figure out a more permanent solution in the next coming days. Maybe I need to pick up another panel or something, but for now this will do, and then I can get constructing the garden beds, which I've been complaining about as I've been doing this. Like, that's really what I want to be doing, is getting the garden in. Just as I finished building the fence up front, the rains came. But now that the rains have passed, I need to begin constructing the raised garden beds. Originally, I thought about cutting down all of these saplings in the back of the property and using them to construct wattle fencing for the beds. But after giving it some consideration, I decided that that was more work than it's worth. Those beds are only going to be a temporary solution until I get the back of the property graded and can install a proper garden in the back here next summer. I also considered using the logs that I had cut from trees around the property. It's been 2 years since they've been cut down, and yet they're still trying to push out branches and leaves, which means if I put them in contact with the wet, moist, rich soil of the garden, they're just going to grow, and I'm going to have trees growing up inside the garden, which I don't want. So instead, I'm going to attempt to tear down this old raised garden bed and carry it up front and reconstruct it in the dog run. Because as I mentioned, the back of the property is going to get graded, which means that this original garden is going to be leveled, and that means this has to go either way. So I'd rather put it to good use than see it destroyed by a bulldozer. So wish me luck, because this has been sitting here for a number of years, and these bolts that are in here, I'm sure, are rusted into place. Now I know I could be using the drill to do this, and I might go get it, but I need to get these started anyhow before that, because some of these I'm feeling are stripped, like this one here, and might not come out. My other option is to take a sledgehammer to this and bring it down that way. Oh, this is going to be a lot of work. I was feeling a sledgehammer is not really going to work either, considering they're going through, you know, what, 8-10 inches of timber. Sure would be nice to reuse those though. But as you can see here, I can't even get the wrench down in there. Well, there's one down. Woohoo! I'm gonna set the camera to time lapse, and if I'm lucky, I'll get this taken apart without a bear walking up on me. So I just ripped that log right there off of here. And the problem that I'm having is that the lags that are in there are so old that they're rusted, as you can see, and they're just breaking and they're just spinning in place. So, yeah, that's going to be an issue when I go to reconstruct this. And then the other issue that you can see here is that they're sunken, right? They're so far down inside of there that I'm having to chip away at the wood in order to get a grip on them to get them out. Considering that the lags are stripped and many of them are just breaking before I can get the timbers apart, I'm gonna take a sledgehammer to this garden bed and see if I can get it apart that way. Wish me luck. Because if not, I guess I'm on to the next plan. The fourth idea, which I don't have yet. Wish me luck. That one worked, but mainly because I got the first lag started. But I need to tear down this. You ever have those days that you just waste? You just wasted days? That's what this is. This is a wasted day. This was a failed attempt, a wasted day. You know, it's a noble attempt to try to save this garden bed. It's a bad day here in Wonderland. Well, after a frustrating and failed attempt to remove the raised garden bed in the old garden, Kenai and I actually headed down to the Kenai Peninsula. Yes, that is his namesake. And Spent a couple days down there because I need to pick up the stone for my countertop, but that will be in a future video, so be sure to check back for that one. In the meantime, let's head back into the garden and see if I ever get that garden bed removed. After giving it a couple days consideration, I decided the best thing for me to do was to grab a heavier sledgehammer and just come out here and pound this bed apart. So I've gotten the majority of it taken apart, but now I need to deal with this cold frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on some gloves and I'm gonna knock the crap out of that cold frame and get it taken apart. Let's see how it goes. Yay. Now to take the rest of this apart and then start carrying timbers all the way over to create the new bed. Yesterday I was able to move all of the timbers over here, but now there are these screws here that were left in place. So I need to get rid of these before I reassemble this. So I'm going to attempt to use some vice grips, to get these out. I'm just going to bend them back and forth till they snap off from metal fatigue. Otherwise, I'm going to have to probably use my reciprocating saw and cut them off. I think I'm going to use the reciprocating saw, to be honest with you. Yeah, reciprocating saw it is. I could use my reciprocating saw, but if you don't have a reciprocating saw, you can also use a hacksaw. So I just am going to attempt to do one of these with the hacksaw, but I can guarantee you that this is going to take a lot longer than using the reciprocating saw would. And just like that, because I scored it, I was able to snap it right off with the sledgehammer. So you could do it with the hacksaw if you don't have a reciprocating saw. Just make sure you are wearing gloves, and I should have had the safety goggles on even while using the hacksaw because there are metal filings that are coming off. So I'm going to tend to the rest of these, and if I use the reciprocating saw, I'll bring you along for that as well. So luckily some of them are so weak and fatigued that they're just snapping, and I'm not really having to use any of the power tools. But back to work I go. So after breaking off all of the screw tips or tops that were extending from the timbers, I've gone ahead and sorted all these by size. And now I'm going to start assembling this jigsaw puzzle inside of the dog run and create that bed. But even after I get these in place, there's more to be done. Ooh, this is going to be a long video. Buckle up, folks. We got a long way to go. Probably wondering why I didn't remove the soil from behind that and level that out a little bit more. I actually don't want it sitting directly against the logs. I want there to be a space between. So that's why I did that. I'll level as I go. I got the basic outline of the garden bed in place, but as you can see, it's not level. And so I'm going to have to add some soil underneath these. I don't really want to dig down any further. But I'm going to level this out as I go. And after I get it level, then I'll bring in the second layer of timbers. Once that's done, I'll be adding in some hardware cloth and then some cardboard. And I'm going to discuss the pros and the cons of using cardboard in the garden. I have found over the years that cardboard is not necessarily the best way of keeping weeds out, despite what popular opinion is. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Well, I need to cut down some of these timbers to make them fit exactly in. I've gone ahead and I've staggered the timbers so that they're not all the same size stacked right on top of each other. But now I need to cut this one to make it fit in this back corner. So you always want to make sure that you have the right tool for the right job. So here we go. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Let me get my chainsaw and we'll get this sawed correctly. All right, it's a little angular, but that's because of the way I'm cutting. But now this should fit in that back corner. And so I'm going to go ahead and continue to cut all these to size, and then we'll be right back. Now that I have all the timbers cut to size and put into position, I need to secure them so that they don't topple in or outward of the bed itself. And what I'm going to use are these copper-clad steel rods. These I have found throughout the garden as well as the cabin. The previous owners used these to make a hoop house for the garden, but these are mainly used in shipbuilding. So they have a marine application. However, since I have these here today, I'm going to go ahead and put them to good use and get these garden timbers secured into place. One thing to remember about this garden bed is that it is only temporary. This will be here for at least this summer, maybe next, until I get the fence put around the back of the property. So I don't want to pound these in all the way. And besides, leaving them up like this means I can also create a hoop house over this garden if I need to. So this grounding rod has been found throughout the garden, mainly used to hold the old garden fence in place. But it is attached by some wire, so I'm going to have to go ahead and cut that so I can pull all of these rods out. And this garden fence needs to come out because, like I said, this backyard is about to get leveled. Now that the bed is secure in place, I'm going to go ahead and begin to line the bottom of it with 1/4-inch hardware cloth. This is going to keep rodents such as voles from digging up into the garden. However, this does nothing to prevent weeds from coming through. So I will be using cardboard to line underneath the soil and between the hardware cloth. This will prevent the weeds from being able to poke up through easily. However, there is the common opinion of using cardboard in the walkways under a layer of mulch. In my experience, what I've found is that that has not worked well for me. Back in Colorado, I had an issue with thistle as well as bindweed. And since cardboard is typically only about 3 layers thick, with 1 layer being corrugated, I found that it broke down pretty quickly and that the bindweed was able to find its way through the cracks and the crevices, and the thistle would just poke right up through the cardboard, despite having about 8 inches of mulch on top of it. What I found works better in walkways is to use contractor paper that you can get at the local hardware store, or even newsprint. If you just take several layers of newsprint and you overlap them so that the sun cannot come in underneath the overlap. So if the sun's coming in the afternoon from this direction, you want your overlap going that way as well. So the sun hits the top and not comes in underneath. That, when I used newsprint or contractor paper, I had no bindweed come up through, nor did I have the thistle poke through it. I don't know what the difference is between the newsprint and the contractor paper. And you only need about 4 layers of that down, and you'll find that it'll work much better for you. It's what my grandfather used to do as well, was layers of newsprint, and he never had weeds in his walkways. That's a tongue twister in and of itself. But I'm gonna go ahead and begin to get this all put together, and then I'm gonna fill this with duff, which is basically fallen pine cones and leaves and needles and what have you from around the forest. Fill that in, and then I'm going to mix in some of that old compost from the previous garden, as well as some new soil, and get my plants in the ground. Part of the reason that I'm using the forest floor to fill those garden beds is because, as I've mentioned in a couple of my videos, the fire danger in this area of Alaska is extremely high right now. There's been burn bans in place, and anything I can do to help create a fire barrier around the cabin is to my benefit. So as you've seen, as I've been raking up the duff, as it's called, it's very dry. And this would just act as tinder and kindling and fuel that fire. So I'm going to clear as much as I can around the cabin of the forest floor and use that to fill the beds. And in the next week or so, the stand of trees in which I'm standing in right now are all coming down, and that will also help to widen that fire barrier around the cabin. Now, I know that there are some that would say that adding this much brown material to the garden is going to tie up nitrogen in the garden. But to be honest with you, I'm not worried about that. I have other ways of combating that. I will be adding in some green manure as well, some green fertilizers. And between the two of them, I'll have a nice compost. I don't want to do it too rich though, because I don't want to burn the roots of my plants. So it's mainly going to be soil, but this is just going to help fill in that bottom layer. And the top foot is going to be essentially soil. One nice thing about using dried leaves like this that have been sitting on the forest floor rotting is that they're full of mycelium. Mycelium is a beneficial fungus that will basically act in a symbiotic relationship with the roots of the plant, basically feeding them with a good fungi, if you will. So I'm going to continue to collect some of the forest floor, fill up the bottom half of the bed here, and then I'll be adding some soil from the garden. And on top of that, I'll be adding some amendments. And this is essentially just a hugelkultur method of gardening. So I got my work cut out for me. It's getting late in the day and I want to get this done. Oh, I think I got them all. Nope. So those of you wondering what I do for Kenai, he doesn't mind wearing a net either. It's keeping him off his face and keeping him from pawing his face, so. Originally, I wasn't planning on using this soil, but after picking off the timbers, I can tell that this is very rich garden soil, essentially. Now, I might have some grass seed in here and what have you, but I'll just have to do a diligent job of weeding this as the garden starts to progress. But I'm gonna go ahead and fill up my wheelbarrow and haul as much of this as I can over to the garden. One of the things I actually like about gardening is getting my hands in the dirt. So I'm not too concerned about my hands drying out or anything like that. I actually like playing in the dirt. So I've got about 4 more of the little tractor gorilla carts full of soil to bring over, and then I'm gonna top this off with some amendments and get things planted in the ground. And then I think I'm gonna sleep like a rock. All right, back to work. So the final step before planting is just adding in these bags of potting mix plus fertilizer. I know potting mix might sound a little bit odd for a garden bed, but remember that raised beds do dry out quicker, and so this will help to hold some of the moisture in because it's full of vermiculite and peat. So this bed does have a lot of acid in it, so I will be adding some things to counteract that. But honestly, like I said before, I'm really not that concerned about it. All right, I'm back to cutting up bags of potting mix. I'm sure I look pretty exhausted here, but yesterday was a lot of work. So at least this project is coming to an end as far as getting things in the ground finally. But nonetheless, here are the seedlings that I had started. And as you can see, everything's lush and green and growing tall. But that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is these Italian cabbages, they're very leggy. This is not going to be successful. I can already tell you that. So these ones I probably should have gotten outside a little bit earlier. It looks like I could go ahead and stick them in a little bit further because I can see roots starting along the stem there. I don't know if you can see that. Yes, right there. You can see that it's trying to root as it's laying on top of the soil. So I'll just stick these down in a little bit further and get them to take root. And then I have, my other storage cabbages, which look awesome, except for the fact that it's only really that one pod, because this one has bolted and gone to flowering. There, you can see that. So this one has bolted and has begun to flower, which means it's not going to produce anything. And then you see this little one right here. Well, while I had these hardening off in front of the cabin on top of the wood pile, a shrew, I'm assuming, came by and nibbled off all the leaves. Well, that's what's happened to most of the cabbages. And what that was is, I'm assuming, a shrew. So I had these sitting in front of the cabin on the wood pile, hardening off. And I came out the next morning and something had nibbled off all the leaves. It wasn't a moose because he would have taken the whole thing out of the tray. I don't assume it was a caterpillar, though I suppose that's quite possible. But if you ask me, I'm assuming it was the shrew came and ate these. So it's part of the reason I put the hardware cloth in the bottom of this is to keep the voles from coming up through the bottom of the garden bed. And I'm praying that having this as opposed to a stair step, they won't be able to get in here by climbing over the top of this. No guarantee though. So I did some research about how to keep voles out of the garden. Most of the things that I could find talked about moles, but I don't have moles. I have voles, which is a shrew. It's like a little mouse type creature that eats mushrooms and moss and things like that. They're really cute little creatures, but until they eat my crops. So I need to figure out what I'm going to do to prevent them from getting in here and eating everything. I'm going to take my chances with these and put them in here tonight and see if something comes out and eats them again. And if they do, I'll just hit up a nursery and pick up some more crops and ask them how they're protecting themselves from the voles. Oh, I did want to talk about a couple of other things. So not only do I have these things here that I started in the seed pods, but I have some things that I'll be planting directly, like peas and daikon radish. So these, you know, they can go directly in the ground and they'll do fine. My carrots, I'll be planting directly, beets, things like that that can just go directly into the ground, some Brussels sprouts. I also will be planting some flower seeds. The mosquitoes are relentless. I've sprayed my face so many times today, but they are just absolutely relentless. But anyhow, I'll be planting some of these on the outside of the flower bed just to add some visual interest. And inside the flower bed, I'll be planting marigolds. I don't have any nasturtiums started. It's a little late in the season to do so, but the marigolds will help to invite some beneficial nematodes and eat some other non-beneficial insects. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start planting, and I'll show you when it's all done. I haven't even gotten the garden hardly planted. All I've planted so far are these peas and these beets, and yet my first crop is ready to harvest. This poor boy, I can't keep him out of the bed. Every time I turn my back, he's sleeping in the dirt. So when I got that big freeze, I thought all of my potatoes had frozen and that they would be no good. But I left them sitting in the pantry. And believe it or not, there are some in here that are still actually really firm. But as you can see, they've started to chit or sprout, in other words. And so I have this mass of rooted potatoes in here that I'm going to go ahead and plant. These potatoes actually came here locally, so I'm not concerned about them having blight or anything like that. But I'm going to go ahead and get these planted. I have both some red potatoes and some Yukon Golds. And I'm just going to do half of these on one side and half of these on the other here. And I should have a nice potato harvest for next year, provided I don't let them freeze again. Now these ones I'm not going to dump out because, as you can see by the bag, some of these have started to mold. But this is just a giant mass of roots. That's all potato roots in there. So I'm going to try to salvage some of these and plant them on that side. Crazy. Now I know that I could cut this in half and get twice as many off of this, but honestly, there's no need. Each one of these is going to sprout regardless. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these beets planted, and then I'm going to continue on planting the rest of these plants and get this garden in the ground so that I can get you a video. So with that being said, I want to thank you for watching today's video, and I hope to see you here in the comments on this video as well as the next one. So please leave me some thoughts down below on how you think the garden will succeed this year, and I look forward to catching up with you then. Until next time, stay safe and take care. Oh, and stick around for some outtakes if you would. Well, it's finally, well, my hair's blowing in my face. Well, it's finally the threat of frost, the threat of this is heavier than I'm probably making it look, but it is heavy. Oh. All right. Oh, this might work well. Yeah, maybe. Whew. This has been a chore. This has taken a lot longer than I expected it to. But at least this part's almost done, 99.9% done. And then on to the garden. All right, back to work I go. You notice I say that a lot in my videos, back to work I go. I should be like Snow White's, one of seven Snow White's. You ever notice that I say that a lot? Back to work I go. It's like I'm one of the dwarfs from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Dopey. That's the one. If they had one called Ditzy, you know, that would be me. The Ditzy dwarf. Their sister they no longer speak to or speak of. But now, this May turns, it should be up by about 1/4 of an inch, and it's not. So it's just spinning, but it is held along below to the timber blower. All right. Man, frustrating. You know what happens when you give yourself timelines? Things don't work out right, and you miss your timelines, you miss your deadlines. You would think, what are you in such a hurry for, Alone? You've got all the time in the world to get things done. You've got so much to do. So yesterday, are you trying to claw your way out? Are you trying to, he's in the kennel trying to get out. Hey, I'm recording. So yesterday I was able to move all of these